I would like to yield to Senator Sampson. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson, do you accept the yield?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you to my very intelligent and capable colleagues, Senator Fazio and Senator Summers, who did a tremendous job of breaking down what is happening here today. I rise, I guess, to add a little more context to this conversation. And I'll start by just making a quick mention that this morning, before we gavelled in, I had one of my elementary school classes up here just to visit the Capitol, as they often do, and everyone around the circle is familiar with having their students come and visit us here at the Capitol and get a quick look at the House and Senate chambers. And you know, they were rightfully impressed with this chamber and the House chamber as well, as I am today. Every time I walk into this room, I feel the weight of importance of what we do in here, and always trying to put my best foot forward. And this morning, what was really interesting is we had the usual conversation about the makeup of the chamber and, you know, what the boards are for and who are those names up there and all that stuff. But one of the students asked me today, what's the difference between Republicans and Democrats? Which is a question that comes up pretty often. And when I'm asked that question, I always try and give the fairest, most honest answer I can, and one that I think my Democratic colleagues would respect and appreciate as accurate. And I said to this young lady, I said, well, I think the Republicans are about small government, about protecting the rights of individuals to live as they choose. And I think Democrats don't necessarily disagree with that, but they believe that government has a much larger role to play. And I think that that is fair, and certainly anyone in this chamber can get up at any time and speak, and if that is something that I overstep my bounds, I'm sure I'll hear about it. But I don't think most of my Democratic colleagues would disagree with that characterization. And you know, the thing is, I've always respected that. I've always respected that we have a different way about going about things, about getting to what we all agree is better for the state of Connecticut and improving our world. The problem I have is that I offer that respect over and over up until a point. And then a point appears, a line rather than a point maybe, where I can see the damage that is being done by their worldview. And when that happens, I have to speak up, as I often do here in this chamber. And I think today is a really good opportunity for us to take a look and contrast what is happening here in Connecticut versus what is happening in Washington, D.C. And I think ever since the current president was sworn in, Democrats across this country have been attacking him for cutting people in need and putting state funding at risk and things like that. And yet, what I'm seeing is a man who is absolutely 100% concerned about the future of our country. He's absolutely 100% concerned about saving our economy. In fact, I'd say he's 100% concerned about saving Medicaid. And the plan in Washington, with the one big beautiful bill that they're working on right now, is to preserve Medicaid by making sure that the funds exist for the people that actually deserve it. People that are truly in need, people that don't have a mechanism to earn or raise money themselves in a way that they need to support themselves. And what I'm seeing here in Connecticut is a fight to preserve the nanny state, a fight to preserve the massive and rampant expansion of Medicaid in a way that I don't think was ever determined to be good policy or the right way to handle things. And we're watching the governor, we're watching the majority posturing about how they're going to blame the President of the United States for any future damage to Connecticut based on actions they're taking. The president has threatened to cut aid to states that are spending Medicaid dollars on illegal aliens. And despite that, we don't see any movement from the majority party or the governor in this state to change that policy. In fact, we see the opposite. We see them doubling down on the fact that we are going to defy the president. We're going to dare the president. The president has also said, you know, you're putting your federal funds to states at risk if you continue with DEI policies. And what are we seeing? We're seeing Democrats in Connecticut going, no, we're going to double down on our DEI policies. We do not care. So I stand here frustrated, trying to understand and respect my colleagues, that they have a different worldview, that they think the government has a way to help and solve things, and yet what I'm seeing is their use of the government might in fact jeopardize funding for our state, may in fact result in less people being taken care of. Both Senator Fazio and Senator Summers mentioned the fact that this is being characterized as an emergency. In fact, the governor declared an emergency today. And this reminded me of a couple of years ago, in the wake of the pandemic, how we continue to declare emergencies as a state. I say we, but I mean the governor declared emergencies in the state repeatedly. Even though there were a handful of people still in the hospital and the damage of the pandemic had long since waned, we were still declaring emergencies here in Connecticut. And why were we declaring emergencies? For federal funding. This emergency is a phony emergency also. The fact of the matter is that there is a way to resolve this problem simply by shifting funds in our state budget where we have excess money to places where we don't have enough. Problem solved. No emergency declaration required. No breaking the guardrails required. But you notice they don't want to do it that way. They want to do this by breaking the guardrails on purpose. And they want to use a so-called emergency as a mechanism to justify that action. There is a real emergency going on, don't get me wrong. It's not about the lack of Medicaid funding or something to do with how our budget might be out of balance momentarily. There is a real emergency, though. And the real emergency in the state is that there are a great many people who cannot afford to live here. I hear daily from people in my district that they're struggling to pay their taxes, they're struggling to pay their electric bills, they have to make hard decisions about whether they buy their medication or they buy milk. And why is that? You know, I was having a conversation before I walked in here about the perception in the public. Do people really realize why things cost what they do? And the conversation that I was having with this other person, we kind of agreed that I think most people are, you know, very keen on noticing the sales tax that they have to pay. They notice their income tax when they file their taxes at the end of the year. But I don't think the vast majority of people actually factor in the fact that everything that we buy, every good, every service that is purchased in the state of Connecticut has a mountain of additional costs and fees associated with it because of the actions of government, state and federal. And I wish they did, because I think if you could actually put a label on every product out there that didn't just tell you the nutritional information, but it also said, well, the price you're paying for this includes the fact that you had to pay for this program, and you had to pay for this special interest, and you had to pay for this government employee. If those numbers were actually on the label of the products that we buy, I think that government would be a heck of a lot smaller, frankly. This is nothing new, ladies and gentlemen. I've been here since 2011 is when I was sworn in. And coincidentally, I think that was the year that we passed maybe the largest budget increase in the history of our state of Connecticut. And then only a few years later, in 2015, we passed the second largest tax increase in the state of Connecticut. I say we, but I have only voted for one budget in the whole time that I've been here, and actually it was a budget that actually passed both the House and Senate chamber that went on to be vetoed by the governor and then replaced by a compromised budget. We are here today because of a series of events. And I can't, even though I like to talk a lot sometimes on the floor, get into the entire series of events, but I just want to mention a few things. One of my first duties when I was in the House of Representatives was to serve on the Insurance Committee. And I remember vividly the creation of the Affordable Care Act and how it impacted the state of Connecticut. I believe at the time there were only somewhere between 100 and 200,000 people that were on Medicaid in the state of Connecticut. That number today, a little over a decade later, is over 1 million. And how did that happen? That happened through a whole series of events. But there's 3 key ingredients to it. One of them was the creation of Obamacare, which effectively became a mechanism not to do as the majority said, give people opportunities to buy alternative types of health insurance, but instead it became a mechanism for the state of Connecticut to take applicants for insurance and instead direct them straight to the Department of Social Services and put them on our Medicaid rolls. That's where that increase I just mentioned came from, maybe a 10-fold increase in a little over a decade. There's also the fact that we provide health care through Medicaid to illegal aliens, an expense that I don't think the majority of Connecticut residents are in support of. And finally, there's a never-ending series of adjustments, enhancements, and mandates to our social services programs and available benefits. I think several times a year we come into session for the express purpose of passing yet another mandate that would go ahead and affect our Medicaid dollars. I'm going to bring up 2017 just because it's been mentioned a couple of times. 2017 was a very interesting year. That was the year that the House and Senate chambers were near parity. And that was a budget year, of course. And because the majority had very slim margins, they didn't have a lot of excess members. In order to pass a budget, they really needed to get all of their people on board. And anyone who's served in this building for a while can tell you that sometimes getting even a small group of people on board with a particular policy can be a difficult thing. But to get both chambers with slim majorities on board with a budget that is somewhat sweeping and has a lot of decisions and choices as part of it can be a difficult task. And I remember it vividly because I remember particularly the House Democrats could not get all of the different factions to agree on what would make a good budget. And they struggled. In fact, when I served in the House, they brought us in at 9 or 10 in the morning a couple of times. And we ended up going home without doing anything. Just brought the people in, I guess, to try and get people in a room to have a conversation and see if they could get the budget passed. But in the end, they didn't, and they sent us home. And this went on, and in fact went on after the session ended. And the only thing that was going to happen then was we were going to come in for a special session eventually when the majority figured out how to put together a budget. Well, that day did come. It came in, I think, late September. And we came in, and instead of the Democrats passing their budget, what happened instead is Republicans offered an alternative that several Democrats in this chamber chose to join in with and voted and passed out of this chamber, which went to the House, and the same thing happened down there. Practically a miracle. I still think about it and wonder how it could even be possible, given what I deal with most every day as a member of the future majority. Madam President, in fact, I don't call us the minority much anymore. I try and refer to us as the future majority, because I do believe that the day-to-day operations of our state government are heading us in that direction. At any rate, what happened after that, sadly, is that even though we passed this great budget, a bipartisan budget, with I think every Republican vote and a handful of Democrats in both chambers, and a budget, by the way, if we were living under today, we would be in a far better fiscal shape. The next thing to happen, frankly, was sad, because that budget went to the governor's desk, and Governor Malloy at the time vetoed that budget.
Point of order. I believe that the senator, I believe, has strayed from discussion strictly limited to the four corners of the bill, talking about past, present, future, speculative legislative majorities and things of that nature. That is something that would certainly be appropriate for a press conference or some other proceeding outside of this chamber, but not within the chamber. Madam President, I would urge that you caution the member, direct him to talk about the bill.
Thank you, Senator Looney, and indeed I would give that cautionary advice to Senator Sampson. If you would please proceed, sir. And
thank you very much, Madam President. I certainly respect the good senator, and I will heed his words as much as possible. I'm simply trying to describe why we are in the situation that we are in, where we're having to make a difficult decision. And our history as a body and the votes that we've taken on policy in the past has led us to this point. But I completely understand, and the majority certainly has the ability to dictate to the minority what we can in fact talk about, since they hold the votes to even debate that question if it were to come to the point of doing so. So I will just try and finish up my remarks by reminding everyone that there is an alternative to what we're doing here today. There's no reason to engage in this type of emergency action. We can simply adjust the current budget in the way that will be laid out in an amendment that we are going to offer shortly. I did want to get to a certain point in my dialogue about the past to talk about 2023, because that is directly relevant, and I think it's super important, because in beginning of 2023 is when this body, this chamber, got together and passed our statute about the guardrails. And that was a unanimous statute. We passed it in both chambers. I believe every member supported it. That was a spending cap, a bonding cap, a volatility cap, all items designed to keep our state budget in the confines of good fiscal policy. The immediate budget that was passed after that is the budget that we are currently within, the 24-25 budget. I just think it's astounding that we're sitting here in the very first budget drafted after a mutual, unanimous agreement that we should abide by these confines of the guardrails, that the majority is suggesting that we have to disregard them completely. I just find it shocking that they couldn't get through one budget cycle keeping with the guardrails, and that we've had to go beyond. But this is the way things work in this building, frankly. And I'll just close by saying that I'm proud to stand with my Republican colleagues today and say no. We are going to continue to take the position that certain things are important. And when we make a promise to our constituents that we're going to limit our spending to a certain degree, or we're going to limit how much we bond to a certain degree, that we keep those promises to them. As was mentioned by Senator Fazio, most of us ran on the fact that we were going to abide by these guardrails in both parties. I'm going to keep my promise today. I'm going to vote no to break the guardrails. And I encourage everyone else to keep their promise as well. Thank you.